Here comes Stugotz. Right all weekend when college football collapses, and he says, see, I told you Alabama was going to get back in, and we all want Alabama in because don't put any of these frauds, TCU or any of these people in here. Alabama would be better in a top 4 because we know they have a bunch of pros all over the place, and playing college football games doesn't matter at all.
If you asked the public what they wanted, they would have told you. You had a chance there. And I have to commend the committee because they resisted the opportunity to give us Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Ohio State. They went with TCU. That's not my problem. Keeping TCU there is fine. But I thought this committee was supposed to think differently. We're doing this the same way we were doing it with the AP poll and the coaches poll growing up. If you have one loss, we slot you ahead of the team with 2 losses. I am sorry. Ohio State does not deserve to be in this playoff. I know it's sexy. I know it's attractive. Dan, they beat a Notre Dame team that lost to Marshall at home, okay? Seemed like a good victory then. Not a great victory armed with hindsight. They had one opportunity at home to play a great team that got blown out. And you're putting them in the playoffs? I thought the committee was supposed to get together and say, hey, you know what? Now this 2-loss team deserves to be in over this 1-loss team. Here's why.
This is why Stugotz wins. And it's all a stupid game. It's all dumb. It's so dumb because Stugotz will win at the end of college football. Apocalypse is upon us. Let's buy the players. Let's have the payment from boosters somehow who aren't affiliated with the television money. And it's just, let's crowdsource how we play this semi-professional football. At the end of the season, you know who's going to be in the game? Who Stugotz thinks should be in the game. I think Alabama's good, and you can't in your right mind make an argument on behalf of Alabama over Tennessee, Stugotz, can you? If Tennessee's got 2 losses as well and beat Alabama.
It was on the road, tough environment.
Tennessee
lost
has
by
a
3.
blowout loss to South Carolina.
It's just but this is where we are with college football. Alabama gets to play in the game because we know they're one of the best. That's it.
Alabama,
they're out.
They're out. But
Ohio State is the number 4 seed.
Do you think that Alabama would be favored over 3 of these 4 teams?
I do actually. I made that point last week, but I mean,
Nick Saban made that point.
Nick Saban made that point on every network where he campaigned to have Alabama make the playoff.
He called into the Fox halftime show.
If Alabama wanted to make the playoff, you got to win your games. They had 12 chances to make the playoff, and they passed 10, and they failed at 2. So they don't make it. That's how it works, unfortunately.
I know, but that's the way it's always worked. And I thought we were putting together a committee that would think differently.
I don't understand. They did.
Yeah.
They didn't put Alabama in. They'd always put Alabama in.
No, they put the 1-loss teams in, the undefeated and 1-loss teams.
But Stugotz isn't that like the most
it's putting Ohio
Stugotz way of doing the problem? Who won more? Who lost more?
Yes,
put the team that won more in.
I hold them to a higher standard. Yes, that's the way I would do it, and that's the problem.
Dude, this was what I was hoping this conversation was going to lead to, was the idea that if Stugotz were on the committee, he'd be sitting in that chair shitting on his own.
1 loss.
Who is Alabama's best win?
1 loss.
Oh, that's such a good question.
I mean, probably Mississippi.
Not Mississippi. Do you actually know who their only good win is this season off the top of your head?
I would say Mississippi.
It's
so
not
clearly I don't.
It's Texas, and they beat Texas at Texas with Texas backup quarterback. Do you know?
And by a play, Jessica. By a play, by a point and by a play, they barely beat Texas.
You know how TCU did against Texas? They beat them.
Okay.
And they only lost 1 game in overtime to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. Do you know who didn't make their championship game because they lost their division?
Who?
Alabama.
Okay, so I'm not upset about TCU. I'm applauding them for putting TCU in the playoff. It's Ohio State. You can make an argument.
Who is Ohio State's best?
Ohio State was trailing to Northwestern in the second half. Trailing to Northwestern.
Who is Ohio State's best?
They have 1 win. Not in the United States. They're number 1 in Ireland, and that's it. Northwestern.
They beat Northwestern. You're picking a really random weird game
21-7
to get upset about. They
got blown out by Michigan at home.
I don't want to defend Ohio State. Stop making me defend Ohio State. But Ohio State has
the thing I said about
top
Notre Dame,
25.
right? That's what it is.
I'm not mad about that. Ohio State. Look, you're picking the edgy argument here, which is Bama instead of Bama over TCU, Bama over Ohio State. I get it. Ohio State has a better resume than Alabama. Just period. They do. They lost to Michigan, who's the 2 seed, in the last weekend of the regular season. But they have a better resume. They beat Penn State. They beat Notre Dame. They didn't lose any of their other games. Alabama lost to LSU, who got blown out by Georgia in the SEC championship game, and Tennessee, who got blown out by South Carolina the second to last week of the season. Alabama's out. Ohio State's in.
But I would think, Jessica, that the easy thing that's happening here is just people are saying Alabama's great because Alabama's always been great, and it means more to be able to win any of your games in the SEC, even if we can't remember any of the important ones. You did it in the SEC. It's better than Michigan and Ohio State. We all know this.
They didn't do it in the SEC. They lost to 2 SEC teams. They didn't do it in the SEC.
But they did beat Arkansas. They beat Mississippi. They beat Mississippi State.
Yeah, but you're not going with ranked teams. The best.
Ohio State beat Maryland.
There isn't a win.
But Maryland's not Mississippi State or Mississippi.
Dude, there isn't a better win for Alabama than on the road at Penn State. There isn't.
I mean, on the road at Mississippi is not.
No,
Mississippi's not even ranked. They lost to Mississippi State.
But at the time, they were ranked 11th, Mike.
I don't care about at that time.
Well, at the time, Notre Dame was ranked
Penn State
5th then, week 1.
I think Stugotz is doing what a lot of people are doing.
Not watching college football.
And just saying the SEC is better.
That's what I'm doing.
The SEC is always better because Mike Leach is there.
Which might not be wrong. Like, it might not be wrong that Alabama has better players and is a better team than Ohio State. Which
play to win.
Right, but we could have said that before the season. We can say that after. We can say that during. There's no point in the sport.
Here's an idea, Stugotz. We should rank the blue blood teams coming into the season with the best talent and the coaches that have won national championships. Texas A&M should be in the playoff.
Yeah. This is Stugotz is
the Aggies.
You guys are not realizing what I'm saying when I say Stugotz wins. Stugotz pays just enough attention to college football the last 5 years that his only analysis is always, did you beat Alabama? And if you did not beat Alabama, then you did not beat anyone who was good. Because Alabama is the best and they rule the SEC. And then the SEC got a little bit more relevant with the famous coaches beneath Saban, and so you think Mike Leach has a good football team, and Mississippi State matter when they're not as good as Penn State and these other teams.
I don't like a world where Georgia can win a national championship without doing it against Alabama. I don't want to live in that world. I like the world with Alabama.
Then get rid of divisions in the SEC. If that's the world that you want.
So you guys, you guys are doing this thing with Penn State, who was 13th at the time, but you say that you don't care what they were ranked at the time.
But they're ranked even higher now.
What are they now?
They're ranked 21 now.
Okay,
they're top 25.
Okay. Bingo.
Texas
they're going over.
Got lucky there. Winner.
This is fascinating to watch you two actually try to use logic and kind of consistency.
I'm sorry. You wait. Penn State is 11. Notre Dame is 21. That's
21.
That's what I got confused on.
That's a fine.
They beat number 11 Penn State, and they beat number 21 Notre Dame.
I said Penn State made a Rose Bowl. It'd be weird for them to make the Rose Bowl at that ranking.
You guys remember in the Avengers,
the granddaddy of them all?
Like Star-Lord pulls out a gun and he tries to shoot Thanos, and Thanos turns it into bubbles. That's what you guys are doing right now. You're trying to pull out guns against Thanos, and he's snapping his fingers.
He's just quickly Googling everything because he hadn't formulated this argument. He's not winning. He's not winning. He's caught an L.
Mike,
he's the same guy that argued you can't expand the college football playoff because a regular season means something, and now he wants to render the regular season meaningless because Alabama didn't do its job in the regular season.
You and Jessica are making arguments on behalf of some antiquated system of how measurements were fair. These are made for television semi-pro football games.
I'm sorry. If winning and losing is antiquated, then fine. But that's the measurement that I'm doing.
Before we argue more about Alabama and all of this, this was a very easy Final Four selection to make for the playoff committee. There's really not a lot to argue about this year. In past years, there hasn't really been that much to argue about either. It usually works itself out, and there's one dominant team in college football. This year it's Georgia, and then 3 pretty good teams, and then maybe a handful of teams that could beat the pretty good teams but didn't do enough in the regular season to make it into the playoff. And that's what we have with Alabama this year. And that's all it is. There's really not that much to argue over.
No, but you're being totally logical, and what you're trying to argue, and this is why Amin is saying, why do you keep doing this as he turns it to bubbles? Because he's looking at you and he's saying, do you understand that the reason Alabama needs to be in the Final Four, and I can make an outrageous claim that they should, is simply because I want to watch them on television?
Yep.